On Sunday, North Korea fired an unidentified projectile from a region near its west coast. South Korea's military has said the nature of the projectile is not immediately clear. Yonhap News Agency reported the projectile launched appeared to be a ballistic missile. Updates to come on this breaking news story.
The CIA has opened a new mission center that's sole task is to monitor North Korea. On May 10th, the agency announced that it had established the Korea Mission Center in an undisclosed location, focused on curbing North Korea's advancing weapons program. The CIA said it aims to harness the full resources, capabilities, and authorities of the agency to thwart the nuclear and ballistic missile threat posed by North Korea. Addressing the mission center's creation, CIA spokeswoman Heather Fritz-Horniak said, quote, just as the threats facing our nation are dynamic, so too must the CIA continue to evolve to address them. The establishment of the CIA offshoot comes amid heightened tensions between Washington and Pyongyang. Last month, the U.S. sent a naval strike group near the Korean peninsula in an effort to deter Pyongyang from conducting further weapons tests. For United News International from Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Burning tyres in the town of Terbouba, 30 kilometers west of the capital, Tunis. The protest followed a fruit seller setting fire to himself and being badly burned. The incident is similar to the birth of the Arab Spring protest movement in Tunisia in 2010. Fruit vendor Mohamed Bouazizi died after setting himself ablaze. That caused an uprising in Tunisia and then revolutions across the Arab world. For Imid Dridi, the desperate act of setting himself alight followed a dispute with police. Recovering from his burns, he says the problems that caused the Arab Spring have not gone away.
The dispute between my business partner and a policeman ended with the strawberries getting scattered on the floor. They were worth around $300 US. I just felt really oppressed. My car is still under lease, you know, and I'm up against it with the bank.
He says that the protest will go bigger as frustrations with police and government continue.
Young people here do not know what will become of them, especially with the way the police treat them. I can understand why they turn to alcohol or even violence. Unemployment is the cause of all this. If they had work, they would never do such bad things.
Protests against living conditions have been going on for weeks in areas of high poverty. President Beji Caid Essebsi announced on Wednesday the army was being sent to protect petroleum and phosphate facilities. Unemployed teenagers especially say there are very few job opportunities and little has changed since the Arab uprising, which was meant to revolutionize lives. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
The Philippine military revealed that China had sent a ship to Benham Rise, an underwater plateau located on the Philippines' eastern seaboard. In 2012, the United Nations confirmed that Benham Rise is part of Philippines territory. It is at the center of Asia's marine biodiversity and its resources remain untapped. This is why, despite China's claim of innocent passage, its presence here has raised concerns. China is also involved in a dispute with the Philippines over the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. China's incursions have raised tensions with other regional countries. The Northern Luzon Command of the Philippine military says there are lessons to be learned.
This is a case of David and Goliath. Despite our having inferior resources, we're coming up with a very superior strategy in order to defend our nation.
The military says it has crafted a long-term plan that includes upgrading its capabilities and increasing its presence in disputed waters. But many here know that is easier said than done. With more than 13 million hectares, the government admits it is not easy to patrol Benham Rise. Foreign countries have shown interests. Vessels have started to enter the territory, doing explorations without the Philippine government's consent. And military officials are concerned. The Benham Rise, they say, may be the next security flashpoint. A few weeks ago, Chinese warships docked in President Rodrigo Duterte's hometown for a goodwill visit. It was the first time in 8 years that the Chinese military was given permission. Since taking office last year, President Duterte has talked about pursuing an independent foreign policy, moving away from its long-standing ally, the United States, while building closer relations with China and Russia.
CNN reports North Korea has launched a projectile. The South Korean military says the launch took place early Sunday from near Kusong, close to the country's west coast. The projectile launch comes 2 weeks after a ballistic missile test that South Korean and U.S. officials said failed when it blew up over North Korean land. Since President Donald Trump was inaugurated in January, the reclusive country has attempted at least 9 missile launches on 6 occasions. Some of those missiles reached the Sea of Japan, also known as the East Sea.
The marches and violence continued in Venezuela as the opposition looked to keep the pressure on embattled President Nicolas Maduro. In the last month and a half, different segments of society, from doctors to old-age pensioners, have taken to the streets. On Saturday, the opposition organised protests around the country. Numbers were down, but that didn't stop stones and tear gas flying in Caracas and here in the border city of San Cristobal. While some people march in San Cristobal, others are crossing this nearby bridge to neighbouring Colombia, and they're going there to try and find the things that they just can't get back in Venezuela. Basic foodstuffs like rice and flour, medicine for sick relatives, and those chronic, long-term shortages are fueling the protests. Many are also angry at what they say is an increasingly authoritarian regime. President Maduro's administration and allies have prosecuted political rivals under terror laws, postponed regional elections, and tried to dissolve the opposition-led Congress. Maduro blamed the leader of that Congress for Saturday's violence.
A crisis meeting at the Reformed Church of Highland Park. The clock is ticking for 4 church members taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
I think it's very, very hot.
The 4 men are among dozens of Indonesians in New Jersey who fled their homeland at a time when Christians were being physically attacked.
We came here because we feel the threat in Indonesia. We were very scared.
People like Billy, who came to the United States in 2001.
My parents is a church leader, and then me is one of the deacon from the church members. So that's really a good target for Muslim people.
The Indonesian Christian community here in New Jersey wasn't on the U.S. government's radar until after the attacks of September 11, 2001, when immigrants from Muslim-majority countries were asked to register. Many here did so, thinking they had nothing to hide. In 2012, the church took in some of the men who were targeted for deportation. They'd been denied asylum on the grounds they waited too long to apply. But Pastor Seth Caperdale helped convince immigration officials under the Obama administration to allow the Indonesians to remain in the country, as long as they checked in with immigration regularly. The pastor is now advising against that under the Trump administration.
20 to 30 years ago, the sea ice covering the Arctic Ocean was dominated by ice that was many years old. This core of old ice survived all year round. Around this core, a smaller fringe of seasonal ice froze each winter and thawed each summer. Old ice eventually drifted out of the Arctic through the Fram Strait. New batches of old ice were built in the Beaufort Gyre. The gyre was a nursery where young ice grew thicker and stronger as it drifted around for many years. Today, summers in the southern branch of the Beaufort Gyre are often too warm for ice to survive. As a result, the amount of thick, old ice in the Arctic has declined significantly. In its place is young, thin ice that's likely to melt in the summer. The small amount of old, thick ice makes the Arctic vulnerable to extreme ice retreat in very warm summers. It's a situation that keeps Arctic wildlife, and the people who live there, poised on the edge of dramatic and possibly irreversible change.
A Russian fighter jet has flown close to a U.S. Navy plane operating over the Black Sea. A U.S. Navy spokesperson said on Friday Russian Su-27 came within about 6 meters of a U.S. Navy plane. According to a U.S. Navy official, the interaction took place on Tuesday, lasted 65 minutes, and was considered safe and professional. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that a Russian fighter jet was sent to intercept a U.S. aircraft approaching the Russian border over the Black Sea Tuesday. The U.S. aircraft later changed its flying course away from the border. Last month, Russian Bear bombers and fighter jets flew off Alaska's shore 4 times in 4 days. In response, U.S. dispatched F-22 stealth fighter jets to intercept the Russian formation.
One day after being suspended when a French landing craft ran aground, multinational amphibious exercises on the U.S. Pacific island of Guam were moving ahead as scheduled Saturday. First Lieutenant Joshua Hayes, a spokesman for the U.S. 3rd Marine Division, said Japanese soldiers will practice rivercraft raids. On Sunday, U.S. Marines plan to conduct live-fire training with French troops. The weekend-long maneuvers also involved the United Kingdom. They were intended to show support for the free passage of vessels in international waters amid concerns China may restrict access to the South China Sea.
The DPRK has accused the U.S. of using threats and intimidation to force other countries to implement sanctions. Pyongyang says Washington is openly threatening countries with strong measures if they do not implement sanctions adopted by the UN. Meanwhile, the DPRK's Foreign Ministry Director General for U.S. Affairs said on Saturday that Pyongyang would engage in talks with the U.S. administration if conditions were right.
With nearly half of the country's population in need of food assistance, humanitarian agencies are warning that the country might slide into famine. Egypt is the latest to join a number of world countries seeking to help avert a possible famine in Somalia by donating humanitarian and medical aid that will support the country's most vulnerable. The Egyptian C-130 military plane landed at the Mogadishu International Airport, with Egyptian authorities saying that this is the first of many consignments that will arrive.
Today, we have officially commenced Egyptian aid to Somalia that will help avert a possible humanitarian crisis in the country. Within the week, a similar cargo plane with medical supplies will come to Somalia, and the medicine will be from Al-Azhar.
The mayor of Mogadishu was on hand to receive the aid. The capital is already home to hundreds of thousands of internally displaced persons.
The Somali public remains grateful to Egypt for its humanitarian assistance. As the local administration, we welcome such kind of assistance, especially at this critical time.
China also donated $10 million to the UN World Food Programme that will go a long way in saving lives. Mogadishu says that its priority is addressing the humanitarian crisis, but has also vowed to launch a nationwide offensive against the Al-Qaeda-linked militants Al-Shabaab. And Egypt has in the past months assisted Somalia militarily by donating vehicles and weapons to newly trained Somali commandos. The country is still facing a 2-decade-long arms embargo and is currently in no position to strengthen its military might. The government wants the Al-Shabaab eliminated within 2 years, but the group continues to carry out deadly bombings across the capital. However, in the just concluded London conference for Somalia, President Farmajo told the world leaders that he wants a strong and a formidable national army in place by the end of this year. And to achieve this, he has asked for the lifting of a 2-decade-long arms embargo against his country so that he can be able to better train and equip his military as they seek to take over the country's national security from the African Union forces. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
For almost 5,000 Greek children each year, life begins in a laboratory. Sperm is captured and injected into an egg. 1 in 5 Greek couples uses artificial insemination, yet here business has fallen by half during the 8 years of economic depression.
Every day we are receiving applications of couples who have had one child to destroy these embryos which remain frozen. Apparently they are not planning to use them to have a second child or a third child. So we have thousands of unborn babies which are destined to die because of the crisis.
Yanis and Athina have a daughter thanks to this clinic. They once planned to have 3 children, but have settled for 1.
We've really agonized over this, and it makes me extremely angry that we have to make such a meaningful decision about our family based on the economy. I don't want finances to kill my dream, but when you find that for the last week of the month you're left with only 5 or 10 euros, you have to think that way.
The decline in artificial insemination is part of a broader reproductive decline. Over 8 years, the birth rate has fallen by a fifth, while the death rate has soared. The result is that 30,000 more people die each year than are born. But the economic depression has also caused another type of population loss, emigration. According to the latest government figures, Greece is losing 45,000 people to emigration annually. Taken together, migration and the falling birth rate are shrinking this society by 75,000 people each year.
For the first time in 5 years, Palestinians are casting ballots. But this local election is restricted in scope because Hamas and other political factions are not taking part. Instead, the contest is largely between individuals, families and rival groups within Fatah, the party which dominates the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank.
No one is giving us decent services. They're all bad in that regard.
It shouldn't work like this, as if there's a state in the West Bank and another in Gaza.
Hamas pulled out of the elections last year in a confrontation over its decision to disqualify some Fatah candidates from running in Gaza, where it has control. With an eye on renewed US input into the peace process, Fatah leader Mahmoud Abbas is trying to pressure Hamas to relinquish that control. The issues contested in this vote for West Bank municipal councils, though, are largely local.
For all of the understandable focus on the division between Fatah and Hamas, for many people, this election is about character, about family affiliation, about local issues and personalities. And for that reason, at a time when engagement with politics, people say, is in decline here, it could be very revealing.
Shawan Jabarin's organization, Al-Haq, is one of the election monitors. He's worried about the lack of a sharply defined political contest.
The internal tension in this election is more than before, for one reason only, because everyone felt that there is no political life, and here the tribes they are in the front.
There's been no presidential election since 2005, no legislative council election since 2006. This vote is hardly a substitute, but at least it gives its participants some level of input into how they are governed. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank.
Britain's National Health Service says it does not believe that patient data was breached following a ransomware attack.
The National Cybersecurity Centre is working closely with NHS Digital to ensure that they support the organisations concerned and that they protect patient safety. And we're not aware of any evidence that patient data has been compromised.
According to CNN, tens of thousands of ransomware attacks targeted organizations around the world on Friday, including 16 that are part of the National Health Service. The problem appeared to begin Friday morning when hospitals in the UK were crippled by a large-scale cyber attack that forced operations to be cancelled and ambulances to be diverted. The ransomware, called WannaCry, locks down all the files of an infected computer and demands the administrator pay to regain control of them. One expert said victims have 6 hours to pay before a $300 ransom goes up. The exploit was leaked last month as part of a trove of NSA spy tools. Cybersecurity firm Avast identified more than 75,000 ransomware attacks in 99 countries.
We believe in free trade. We are the largest, most open market, as I've constantly said. But where we do have large imbalances, we've had very productive discussions with our counterparts. Again, I mentioned the agreement with China. It's a start in the right direction. We've also had conversations with Germany and others of wanting to make sure we have a plan to get to more balanced growth.
Mnuchin was speaking after face-to-face meetings with major trade partners such as Germany, Japan and Canada on the sidelines of a group of 7 finance ministers meeting in the southern Italian city Bari. The meeting focused efforts on growth and fighting tax evasion and illicit money flows. Officials from the Group of 7 also wanted to hear more from Mnuchin about the Trump administration's economic proposals. The gathering is paving the way for a meeting of national leaders in Sicily later this month.